Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tearing down some deeply ingrained financial dogma. Because, look, if you've been doing absolutely everything right, playing by the rules, but you still feel like you're somehow falling behind, well, it turns out you might literally be playing a modern game with a completely outdated rulebook. So we're going to unpack the 2026 Wealth Playbook to figure out exactly why the 1985 strategy is just totally failing us right now.
All right, I want you to think about this for just a second. What is the absolutely most dangerous financial asset you own right now? Seriously, think about it. It's super easy to assume it's, a wildly volatile crypto token, a tanking stock, or maybe those maxed out credit cards, right? Because we're taught to be totally terrified of debt and volatility. But according to this playbook, the real danger, well, it's actually something most of us rely on every single week.
Yeah, it's your paycheck. That totally steady, predictable stream of income that hits your account on the 1st and the 15th. Society literally calls this the ultimate symbol of financial security. But here, it's framed as a massive, glaring vulnerability. Sure, a paycheck feels incredibly safe. But honestly, that feeling is essentially acting as a blindfold to the massively shifting economic ground right beneath our feet.
And this brilliantly illustrates why. We really have to contrast two totally different eras. On one hand, we have the 1985 strategy. You know the drill, the classic advice to simply save more and spend less. And hey, that worked beautifully 40 years ago. But then we have the 2026 economy. The actual mechanics of money have fundamentally changed, and trying to operate in this new reality, it demands a massive mental shift. You literally just can't navigate a modern, complex landscape using a map that was drawn back in 1985.
The source material lays it out perfectly. It says, the old rules of save more, spend less no longer work. I mean, just think about how devastating that actually is. Right now, there are millions of super-focused, hardworking people clipping coupons, skipping family vacations, truly believing they are building this impenetrable fortress of wealth. But that fortress is basically sinking into the sand, because clinging to the dogma of purely saving totally ignores the invisible, relentless forces that are eroding those funds 24/7.
So this begs a pretty natural question, right? Why exactly is that 1985 strategy failing us so spectacularly right now? I mean, if tucking away a piece of what you earn was the undisputed golden ticket before, what is the specific economic villain that has sneaked its way into the system?
Well, the answer really comes down to an incredibly important metric, 3 to 5%. This represents real inflation. It's the silent, hyperactive antagonist in our financial story. See, when your money just sits in a traditional savings account, following that good old 1985 rulebook, it isn't just sitting there safely. It is actively being hunted. Real inflation means the cost of simply existing is compounding higher and higher every single year, actively shrinking the actual value of the money you worked so incredibly hard to save.
Just picture the sheer downward trajectory of your purchasing power over time. When you are constantly hit with that 3 to 5% real inflation year over year, the actual real-world value of your money absolutely plummets. Let's put that into perspective. If you save $1,000 today, a year from now, that exact same $1,000 might only buy you $950 worth of groceries or gas. It's a losing battle. You are effectively trying to fill a bucket that has this massive, ever-expanding hole right at the bottom.
So the crucial point is this. If your savings are constantly bleeding out value due to this inflation, while your only lifeline becomes your active income, which brings us right back to that major issue we talked about, the paycheck vulnerability. When your savings absolutely cannot outpace inflation, you become entirely, completely dependent on your next paycheck just to tread water. You're stuck running on this endless financial treadmill, constantly trading your time for cash that basically starts rotting in value the exact moment it hits your checking account.
And that brings us to a frankly brutal definition from the playbook. Your paycheck is the worst asset you own, simply because it disappears the exact second you stop showing up. Think about it. True assets, things like income-producing real estate or business equity, they generate value while you sleep. But a paycheck requires continuous, uninterrupted, physical labor. The very moment life happens, whether that's a sudden layoff, a health crisis, or just pure burnout, that quote-unquote asset totally evaporates, leaving you 100% exposed to inflation with zero defense.
To actually survive in this environment, the 2026 Wealth Playbook demands a complete and total mental shift.
First off, it requires completely abandoning the idea that save more, spend less is a viable standalone strategy. It's just not. Second, it means you have to acknowledge and treat that 3 to 5% real inflation as a silent tax on your cash, a tax that you have to actively combat. And finally, it requires deeply internalizing that the paycheck is a highly, highly fragile asset. You've got to shift your focus toward acquiring real assets that protect your purchasing power, without requiring your constant day-in and day-out presence.
We've looked at the data. We've broken down the major structural flaws of the 1985 strategy, and we've exposed the silent thief that is real inflation. Honestly, the math is undeniable. So I'm going to leave you with this final, absolutely critical question as we wrap up this explainer. Knowing what you know now about the extreme fragility of a paycheck and the relentless non-stop erosion of your savings, are you ready for the mental shift? Because the 2026 economy is already here, and it certainly isn't waiting around for anyone to catch up.